Imagine winning 2 Oscars, headlining House of Cards, and ruling Hollywood with absolute power. Now imagine it all vanishing overnight, your name deleted from posters, your scenes erased from films, your legacy reduced to ashes. At 66, Kevin Spacey has been declared innocent in court, yet Hollywood treats him like a ghost, unseen, unwanted, untouchable. How can a man be both free and destroyed? The answer lies in the secrets this industry will never admit. Kevin Spacey's story does not begin in the blinding lights of Hollywood, but in a modest suburb of New Jersey where he was born in 1959. His childhood was far from simple. Growing up in a house, overshadowed by a strict and sometimes volatile father, Kevin learned early how to retreat into silence, how to watch people more than speak. Those years shaped the steel mask he would wear for decades, a mask that kept the world guessing. In school, he was often restless, unpredictable, even troublesome. Yet when he discovered performance, he found a channel for all that bottled energy. Acting was not simply a hobby. It became survival, a way to reinvent himself whenever reality felt too heavy. During his teenage years, Spacey gravitated toward the stage, imitating voices and slipping into characters with an ease that startled his teachers. The boy who once seemed directionless had found a focus sharper than anyone imagined. He enrolled at Los Angeles Valley College, then took the leap to the prestigious Juilliard School in New York. There, he was trained with rigor, but even among a sea of talent, his intensity made him stand out. He studied the masters, absorbing Shakespearean cadence and the nuances of body language. On stage, he carried a presence far larger than his frame. Off stage, he remained elusive, giving little away, crafting an aura of mystery that would one day both define and haunt him. Those early years revealed a pattern. Kevin Spacey was not interested in being ordinary. He sought roles that were layered, often dark, and he built a reputation for losing himself completely in a part. It was as if he had no fixed self of his own, only the masks he chose to wear. Audiences and directors alike were drawn to that ability, sensing they were in the presence of someone who could transform into anything. Yet behind the applause, behind the carefully measured charm, he remained a private, guarded figure. Friends and colleagues often admitted they knew his performances better than they knew the man himself. This restless hunger to prove himself, shaped by the shadows of his upbringing, became the fuel for his rise. And while the boy from New Jersey had not yet conquered Hollywood, he was already learning how to bend the stage and the screen to his will. At Juilliard, Spacey's devotion to the craft deepened into obsession. He threw himself into long rehearsals, dissecting the smallest details of movement and voice. While many classmates socialized and explored the freedom of New York, Kevin locked himself into rehearsal rooms, rehearsing lines until his throat gave out. He admired actors who transformed completely on stage, and he was determined to master that same power. The rigorous training demanded sacrifice, but for Spacey it was almost a refuge, a way to channel the turbulence he carried from childhood into something controlled, something beautiful. After leaving Juilliard, he sought every chance to perform on stage, even in roles others might dismiss as minor. On Broadway, he began to attract notice, not for his fame but for the intensity of his performances. Critics described him as a chameleon, an actor who could vanish into any part. That quality made him both unpredictable and unforgettable. In productions of Shakespeare, he delivered villains with a venom so convincing that audiences were unsettled long after the curtain fell. He craved that effect, the ability to linger in people's minds, to unsettle, to command. It was during these years that he developed the reputation of being calculating with his choices. He avoided simple, one-note characters, preferring layered, morally ambiguous roles. Directors noticed his discipline, his precision, and also his distance. Kevin rarely opened up, rarely shared personal stories, and instead let the work speak for him. Colleagues often wondered what he was guarding, but no one could deny that when he stepped onto a stage, the atmosphere shifted. The young man who once seemed restless and lost had now found his identity in constant transformation. His hunger and talent set the stage for something bigger. Theatrical acclaim was only the beginning. But Kevin Spacey had already shown a rare ability to disappear into roles so completely that the line between character and man blurred, and that blurring would soon propel him into Hollywood itself. When Kevin Spacey stepped from the stage into the world of film, he carried with him the discipline of theater and the sharp instincts of a performer who could lose himself entirely in a role. His early screen appearances were small, yet each one left a lasting impression. Casting directors began to whisper about the strange power of this actor, who seemed to steal scenes even when given only a handful of lines. He was not conventionally handsome, nor was he a natural leading man, but he radiated a magnetism that made audiences lean forward. The true turning point came in 1995 with The Usual Suspects. As Roger Verbal Kint, a seemingly meek conman with a limp, Spacey delivered a performance that was both disarming and unsettling. The film's twist ending, now legendary, revealed his character as the ruthless mastermind Kaiser Soze, and it shocked audiences worldwide. Critics hailed his performance as nothing short of brilliant. For many, this was the first time they realized the depth of his talent. For Kevin, it was vindication. He had shown Hollywood that he did not need to be a traditional star to dominate the screen. The Academy agreed, awarding him the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. This victory marked the moment Kevin Spacey transformed from a respected stage actor into a Hollywood heavyweight. He was no longer the newcomer hoping for recognition. He was now a name people would pay to watch, a talent that could elevate any script. That year also brought him roles in other acclaimed films such as, say, 7N, where he played a chilling serial killer with terrifying conviction. With each role, he reinforced his reputation as an actor who could embody the darkest corners of human nature without flinching. By the mid-1990 seconds, Kevin Spacey was no longer on the sidelines. He had secured his place among Hollywood's most compelling actors. Yet this was only the beginning. The boy from New Jersey, shaped by shadows and silence, had become a man whose presence could dominate an entire screen. The industry had started to bow to his talent, and even greater triumphs were waiting just around the corner. By the late 1990 seconds, Kevin Spacey was no longer just a respected actor with a surprising breakout. He had become one of Hollywood's most reliable names, a man capable of carrying entire films on his shoulders. That reputation reached its peak with American Beauty in 1999, a role that would define his career and solidify his place among the greats. In the film, he played Lester Burnham, a suburban husband trapped in a midlife crisis, suffocated by routine and yearning for something more. Spacey's performance was raw, sarcastic, heartbreaking, and disturbingly relatable. He infused Lester with a mix of bitterness and fragile hope, turning what could have been a simple character study into a portrait of an entire generation's disillusionment. Audiences connected instantly, and critics hailed the film as a masterpiece of modern cinema. When the Academy Awards arrived, Kevin Spacey's name was called once more, this time for Best Actor. Standing on stage with his second Oscar in less than 5 years, he had achieved what many actors spend their entire careers chasing. He was no longer the surprising talent from The Usual Suspects. He was now a central figure in American film, a man whose presence meant prestige. The victory was not only professional but symbolic. It crowned him as one of the defining actors of his era, a performer who could capture both the villainous and the vulnerable with equal mastery. This second Oscar gave him a power that few in the industry could rival. Studios sought him out for leading roles. Directors trusted him with their boldest projects, and audiences expected to see brilliance every time his name appeared on a poster. He was no longer just a chameleon. He had become a force, an artist whose work shaped the cultural conversation. Yet with power came expectation, and with expectation came pressure. As Kevin Spacey entered the new millennium, he was not only celebrated but feared. Colleagues admired his skill but also noted the intensity that surrounded him, an intensity that often felt impenetrable. For now, however, the applause was deafening, and Hollywood embraced him as one of its brightest stars. When Kevin Spacey stepped into the role of Frank Underwood in House of Cards, he was not simply taking on another character. He was about to redefine television and usher in a new era of streaming dominance. Released in 2013, the series was Netflix's boldest gamble yet, its first major step into original programming, and it needed a star who could command attention from the very first scene. Spacey was that star. As Frank Underwood, a ruthless politician who clawed his way to power through manipulation and betrayal, Spacey delivered a performance that was both terrifying and magnetic. His sharp Southern drawl, his direct addresses to the camera, and his chilling calmness turned him into one of the most unforgettable anti-heroes in television history. The series thrived on his presence, with every twist and betrayal sharpened by his delivery. Viewers were not just watching a character, they were complicit in his schemes, drawn into his sinister world. House of Cards was more than a show. It was a revolution in how audiences consumed entertainment. Netflix released all episodes at once, inviting viewers to binge-watch, and Spacey's performance became the face of that cultural shift. The series earned him Golden Globe Awards and cemented his reputation as an actor who could dominate not only the big screen but also the new frontier of streaming television. For Netflix, he was the crown jewel, the man who proved that their risky experiment could succeed. Behind the scenes, his influence grew even larger. Spacey became more than an actor. He was a symbol of the prestige Netflix craved. Executives gave him wide creative freedom, and younger actors looked to him as a mentor and a gatekeeper. His power seemed unshakable, his career untouchable. Hollywood insiders whispered that Spacey had achieved something rare. He was not only a star but a kingmaker, shaping the future of television and film with his choices. By the height of House of Cards, Kevin Spacey was living in a realm few actors ever reached. He was respected, feared, admired, and envied all at once. The applause was louder than ever, and it seemed as if no scandal, no criticism, could break through his fortress of influence. Yet history would prove otherwise, and the higher he climbed, the further he would one day fall. By the time House of Cards had secured its place as a cultural phenomenon, Kevin Spacey's influence reached far beyond the screen. He was no longer simply an actor taking roles. He was shaping careers, guiding projects, and quietly deciding who would rise and who would be left behind. In Hollywood, power often operates in shadows, and Spacey thrived in those shadows. Directors and producers knew that his name could secure funding, attract attention, and elevate even the riskiest of projects into something prestigious. His approval carried weight, and his disapproval could close doors instantly. Spacey also cultivated an image of authority in the theater world. As artistic director of the Old Vic Theatre in London, he injected new life into one of the most respected stages in the world. He mentored young performers, spoke of his devotion to the craft, and positioned himself as both artist and guardian of dramatic tradition. For many aspiring actors, working under him was seen as a golden opportunity, a chance to learn from one of the greatest living performers. But for others, there was an unspoken fear. His intensity, his secrecy, and his ability to make or break careers gave him an aura of control that was as intimidating as it was inspiring. In meetings, Spacey had a way of commanding silence without raising his voice. Colleagues described the atmosphere as electric when he walked into a room. He was calculating, precise, often charming, yet always keeping people slightly off balance. Those who worked with him often left with the sense that he knew more than he revealed, that he was always 2 moves ahead in a game only he could see. This enigmatic presence made him magnetic on screen, but in real life it created a wall few could penetrate. It was during this period that Kevin Spacey seemed invincible. He held 2 Oscars, countless awards, a groundbreaking television series, and the respect of international theater. He had cultivated influence on both sides of the Atlantic, balancing Hollywood fame with artistic credibility. He was a broker of power, an architect of careers, and a figure whose reach extended into nearly every corner of the entertainment world. Yet such power comes with a price. The industry, while dazzled by his talent, whispered rumors behind closed doors, whispers of behavior that did not fit the polished image he presented. For years, those rumors stayed in the dark, drowned out by applause and silenced by his influence. But silence never lasts forever, and the storm that had been gathering quietly was about to break open in a way that would change his life and career beyond recognition. In the years leading up to his downfall, Kevin Spacey projected an image of stability and control. He was the face of Netflix's boldest series, the respected leader of London's Old Vic Theatre, and a figure who seemed to glide effortlessly between stage, screen, and boardroom. On the surface, his career was flourishing. Yet, beneath the glitter, whispers moved quietly through corridors and backstage dressing rooms. For years, there had been rumors, uncomfortable stories traded in hushed tones that never quite reached the public eye. Spacey himself seemed aware of these murmurs, and he countered them with even greater secrecy. He guarded his private life fiercely, rarely granting interviews that went beyond the professional, and carefully constructing an aura of mystery. To fans, this only added to his enigmatic charm. To insiders, it felt like a deliberate wall, a defense mechanism designed to keep questions at bay. People who encountered him often described a duality: the charming raconteur who could command a room with a single story, and the cold, impenetrable man who gave nothing away. During this period, his reputation for discipline and perfectionism grew. On set, he demanded absolute focus. At the Old Vic, he was known to push actors to their limits, expecting the same intensity he brought to his own performances. Admirers called it dedication. Critics called it domineering. But few dared challenge him openly. His record of success, combined with the sheer magnetism of his name, made him nearly untouchable. Hollywood, however, is an industry built on fragile balances. The higher someone rises, the more precarious their position becomes. By the mid-2010 seconds, Spacey had amassed a level of power that invited scrutiny. Younger actors began to share experiences quietly. Friends confided in one another about moments that unsettled them, and journalists started piecing together fragments that had long been ignored. For the moment, though, these stories lived in shadows, drowned out by the applause echoing around him. The silence, heavy and tense, hung over his world like a gathering storm cloud. Spacey moved forward with his projects as if nothing could ever touch him, unaware or perhaps unwilling to believe that the storm was already forming, ready to sweep away everything he had built. The silence shattered in October 2017, when actor Anthony Rapp stepped forward with a story that would change Kevin Spacey's life forever. Rapp revealed that decades earlier, when he was only 14, Spacey had made an advance toward him at a party. The timing of the accusation was explosive. The Me Too movement had already begun sweeping through Hollywood, exposing powerful men who had long been shielded by silence. Rapp's account became a lightning strike that illuminated not only Spacey but also the culture of fear and secrecy that surrounded him. The reaction was immediate and unforgiving. Headlines erupted across the globe, and social media turned into a storm of outrage. Within hours, Spacey issued a statement that only deepened the controversy. He said he did not remember the incident, but offered an apology if it had happened. Then, in the same breath, he chose that moment to publicly acknowledge his sexuality, declaring himself a gay man. What he may have intended as a distraction or revelation backfired catastrophically. Many saw it as an attempt to deflect responsibility, and the backlash grew even fiercer. Soon, Anthony Rapp's accusation was no longer isolated. Other men began to come forward with stories of their own, alleging unwanted advances and inappropriate behavior stretching across years and continents. Each new account painted a picture of patterns, not accidents. The carefully built image of Kevin Spacey as an enigmatic but respected artist was crumbling at shocking speed. The industry that had once bowed to him was now rushing to distance itself. Netflix, once his greatest ally, wasted no time announcing that Spacey would no longer be part of House of Cards. The show that had defined the streaming era suddenly had to rewrite its future without its central figure. Productions that had counted on his star power collapsed overnight. Hollywood, once complicit in silence, now turned its back on him in a matter of days. For Kevin Spacey, the allegations were not just a scandal. They were the detonation of a bomb that obliterated his career and reputation. The man who had stood at the center of Hollywood's power structure now found himself cast out, isolated, and condemned before the courts had even spoken. The first accusation had opened the floodgates, and there was no way to close them again. The accusation from Anthony Rapp was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, more men stepped forward with stories that echoed a similar pattern of misconduct, each account adding weight to the avalanche pressing down on Kevin Spacey's career. What had once been whispers in dark corners of the industry were now splashed across front pages and trending on every platform. The effect was immediate and devastating. Netflix, desperate to contain the fallout, announced that House of Cards would proceed without him. It was an extraordinary decision. The show had been built around his portrayal of Frank Underwood, and yet executives concluded that his presence was too toxic to continue. Writers scrambled to reconstruct the narrative, shifting the focus onto Robin Wright's character, Claire Underwood, while filming continued under a shadow of chaos. To industry watchers, the message was clear: Kevin Spacey was no longer indispensable. The shockwaves extended beyond television. Ridley Scott's highly anticipated film All the Money in the World was only weeks from release when the scandal broke. Rather than risk boycotts or outrage, Scott made the unprecedented choice to remove Spacey entirely, replacing him with Christopher Plummer and reshooting his scenes at immense financial cost. That decision stunned Hollywood. If one of its most legendary directors could erase Kevin Spacey from a completed film, then no one would risk keeping him in theirs. His name became radioactive, a liability too great to carry. Projects that had once seemed certain now evaporated. Negotiations collapsed. Scripts were pulled from development. Even awards that once brought him prestige were now an uncomfortable reminder, with whispers that his victories had been tainted. Spacey's career, which had spanned decades and earned him universal respect, unraveled in a matter of weeks. The man who once stood at the pinnacle of Hollywood power had become an exile overnight. The domino effect was more than professional. His presence was stripped from marketing campaigns, interviews, and press tours. Talk show hosts who once welcomed him now avoided his name. The silence that had protected him for so long had given way to a deafening rejection, and the industry rushed to prove its distance from him. The swiftness of his erasure stunned even his harshest critics. Kevin Spacey had gone from untouchable to untouchable in an entirely different sense. Someone, no studio, no network, and no colleague could risk being seen beside. By early 2018, Kevin Spacey was no longer just an actor facing scandal. He was a man erased from the industry he once commanded. In Hollywood, reputation is currency, and his was now worth nothing. Studios that once competed to secure his name in their credits acted as if he had never existed. Films that featured him were pulled from circulation, and streaming services quietly removed projects where his presence lingered. It was not only a fall from grace, it was an exile, swift and absolute. For decades, Spacey had been at the center of power, a figure whose talent and influence shaped the industry. Now he was a ghost, unwelcome in the very rooms he once dominated. Producers refused to return his calls, collaborators distanced themselves, and even longtime friends in the business avoided public association with him. The red carpets that once celebrated his arrival were rolled out without him, and his absence was rarely acknowledged. It was as if Hollywood had agreed in unison to erase him from its story. This exile extended beyond work. Paparazzi who once chased him for photographs now captured him in far darker contexts, walking silently through airports, avoiding cameras outside of courtrooms, or hiding behind tinted car windows. Each image reinforced the perception of a man disgraced, a star fallen so completely that even public curiosity was laced with disdain. The applause that had once followed him everywhere was replaced by whispers and judgmental stares. The sharpness of this rejection revealed something deeper about Hollywood's culture. It was not simply about guilt or innocence, but about the optics of survival. In the era of Me Too, standing by Kevin Spacey was a risk no executive, actor, or studio was willing to take. To protect themselves, they cast him out entirely. For Spacey, the isolation was suffocating. He had gone from omnipresent to invisible, from celebrated to condemned, in less than a year. The tragedy of this exile was not only its speed but its permanence. While other stars weathered scandals and eventually staged comebacks, Kevin Spacey seemed to carry a heavier mark. The industry had decided he was untouchable, and no amount of past brilliance could shield him. At 66, with 2 Oscars and a career once envied by all, he now stood outside the gates of Hollywood, watching as they closed and locked behind him. With his career already in ruins, Kevin Spacey now found himself entangled in a new battlefield, one far more brutal than Hollywood politics. The courts. Allegations that had first surfaced in headlines were soon transformed into lawsuits, investigations, and criminal charges. Each time his name appeared in the news, it was no longer paired with awards or artistic triumphs, but with the cold language of indictments and testimony. In the United States, lawsuits were filed in both civil and criminal courts. Accusers stepped forward with stories spanning decades, forcing Spacey to defend himself again and again. In the United Kingdom, the situation escalated further. British authorities launched a full-scale investigation, bringing multiple charges against him related to alleged misconduct with younger men. The trials became media spectacles, with reporters flooding courthouse steps and cameras capturing every detail of his arrival and departure. For a man who had once carefully controlled his public image, the sight of Kevin Spacey in a suit, walking silently into a courtroom, was devastating. The pressure was relentless. Legal teams battled for years, with Spacey often forced to testify, deny, and explain under oath. Each proceeding dragged his name back into headlines, reinforcing the perception of guilt even as verdicts remained undecided. For the public, it seemed as though he was trapped in an endless cycle of accusations and defense, a man chained to controversies that refused to fade. Throughout these trials, Spacey maintained his composure, at least outwardly. He appeared calm, sometimes even defiant, as though determined not to give the media the satisfaction of seeing him broken. Yet observers noted the toll it was taking. The drawn face, the tired eyes, the absence of his once commanding energy. The Kevin Spacey, who had dominated stages and screens, now seemed like a shadow of himself, fighting simply to survive rather than to perform. The spectacle of these trials was as much about Hollywood as it was about him. For the entertainment industry, his downfall became a symbol of a new era of accountability, proof that even the most powerful could be dragged into the light. For Spacey, however, it was a purgatory that threatened to last forever, a cycle of accusations and defenses that made any thought of a return to acting seem impossible. In July 2023, after years of accusations, hearings, and headlines, Kevin Spacey finally heard the words he had been waiting for. A London jury declared him not guilty on all charges. The verdict arrived on his 64th birthday, a strange coincidence that might have felt like fate, as though life itself had handed him a gift. In court, Spacey wept openly, thanking the jurors and insisting that justice had at last prevailed. For the first time in years, he seemed to breathe freely, no longer under the crushing weight of criminal prosecution. Yet the relief of legal victory was not matched by a return to acceptance. Outside the courtroom, the reaction was starkly divided. Some argued that the acquittal proved the industry had abandoned him too quickly, that his talent deserved another chance. Others, however, remained unmoved. For them, the cloud of suspicion lingered, and the not guilty verdict could not erase the years of accusations or the damage done to his image. The applause he once commanded did not return. Instead, there was silence. Hollywood in particular showed no signs of welcoming him back. No offers appeared, no studios extended invitations. Projects that might have revived his career stayed shelved, and his name remained missing from any serious discussion of new films or series. The industry had made its judgment long before the jury did, and the verdict did not change it. To many executives, he was still a liability, a man whose presence would ignite controversy rather than elevate art. For Spacey, the experience was bittersweet. On one hand, he had fought through the most harrowing legal battle of his life and emerged victorious. On the other, he faced the stark reality that vindication in court was not the same as redemption in Hollywood. He was free, but freedom came with an emptiness. He could walk the streets without fear of arrest, but he could not step onto a set without fear of backlash. This paradox defined the strange new chapter of his life. Legally innocent yet socially condemned, Kevin Spacey became a symbol of a haunting question. What happens when a man is cleared of crimes but never forgiven? The jury may have cleared Kevin Spacey, but Hollywood had already delivered its own irreversible verdict. Unlike a courtroom, the film industry does not deal in evidence or reasonable doubt. It deals in perception, reputation, and the delicate machinery of public opinion. For studios and networks, the question was not whether Spacey had been proven guilty, but whether audiences would ever accept him again without protest. The answer, for now, was no. Hollywood thrives on image. It sells fantasies, ideals, and heroes audiences can believe in. Kevin Spacey's downfall had stained that image so deeply that no amount of courtroom victories could wash it away. Executives understood that casting him would trigger headlines, social media storms, and potential boycotts. Investors would worry, co-stars would hesitate, and directors would be forced into unwanted battles with journalists. For them, it was easier to move forward without him than to risk the chaos his presence would bring. Another factor was the culture of silence that had once protected him. Many insiders whispered that the industry had known rumors about Spacey long before Anthony Rapp spoke out. By turning on him so swiftly, Hollywood was not only punishing him but also protecting itself, distancing the system from the complicity that had allowed his behavior to go unchecked. In the eyes of many, Spacey was more than an accused man. He was a scapegoat, a symbol of everything Hollywood wanted to prove it no longer tolerated. Even his extraordinary talent worked against him. Kevin Spacey was not just another actor. He had been a titan, a man whose influence extended across film, television, and theater. His fall had been too public, too dramatic for an easy comeback. The industry, keen to show it had learned from past mistakes, could not risk granting him a platform again. Forgiveness, in this case, was not only about him. It was about Hollywood's own image of morality and accountability. For Kevin Spacey, this meant living in a strange twilight. He was free, but freedom was hollow without a stage. He was alive, but artistically exiled. The courtroom had closed his legal chapter, yet the industry had locked him outside its gates, leaving him with the bitter realization that innocence in law was not the same as redemption in culture. After the acquittal, Kevin Spacey tried to claw his way back into relevance. He had tasted silence for too long, and the hunger to perform still burned in him. With Hollywood's doors bolted shut, he turned his attention to Europe, where smaller independent filmmakers and fringe projects showed a cautious willingness to gamble on his name. He appeared in low-budget Italian thrillers and small festival-bound productions, hoping that any screen time at all might serve as a stepping stone back toward legitimacy. Yet these efforts failed to spark meaningful attention. Critics dismissed the films, audiences avoided them, and distributors hesitated to promote anything carrying his face. One of the strangest attempts came in the form of videos Spacey released on social media. Every Christmas, he would reappear as Frank Underwood, his infamous House of Cards character, speaking directly to the camera in cryptic monologues. These videos blurred the line between satire, confession, and provocation, unsettling viewers who did not know whether to laugh, cringe, or be disturbed. For some, it felt like a desperate bid to remind the world of the role that had once made him untouchable. For others, it was proof that he could not separate himself from the character who defined his power and his fall. Despite these efforts, the comeback never materialized. Film festivals quietly pulled screenings of projects featuring him after backlash. Directors who initially expressed support later retracted, unwilling to face the storm. Even international markets, often more forgiving than Hollywood, proved reluctant to embrace him. The stigma surrounding his name seemed unshakable, more powerful than any acquittal or artistic plea. The tragedy lay not only in the failure, but in the desperation behind it. Here was an actor who once commanded the global stage, reduced to fringe projects and viral oddities. The man who had been courted by Netflix, showered with awards, and sought by legendary directors now struggled to find anyone willing to stand beside him. Each attempt at a return only underscored how far he had fallen. For Kevin Spacey, these failed comebacks were more than professional setbacks. They were reminders that talent alone was no longer enough. The applause he craved had turned into silence, and no amount of performance could force the world to listen again. With every failed attempt at resurgence, Kevin Spacey slipped deeper into obscurity, becoming less a public figure and more a ghost drifting at the edges of an industry that once bent to his will. He rarely appeared in public, and when he did, his presence carried a surreal weight. Photographs captured him looking older, heavier, stripped of the commanding aura that once defined him. The carefully tailored suits were still there, but they no longer symbolized power. Instead, they seemed like remnants of a man holding on to an identity that the world had already discarded. Spacey's life in exile grew increasingly strange. His Christmas video monologues, delivered in the voice of Frank Underwood, continued year after year, as if he were speaking to an invisible audience that refused to acknowledge him. They became viral oddities, generating conversation not for their brilliance but for their unsettling nature. Viewers debated whether they were veiled confessions, cynical jokes, or desperate cries for attention. In every frame, one could sense a man unwilling to release the ghost of his most famous character, clinging to the last role that connected him to the world stage. Away from the spotlight, he spent much of his time overseas, moving quietly through Europe where anonymity was easier to maintain. Occasionally, he appeared at small cultural events, offering readings or lending his voice to obscure projects. These appearances often surprised attendees, as if they had stumbled upon a fallen monarch wandering without a throne. For all his efforts, though, nothing he did could erase the perception that he had become a man in the shadows, tolerated but never celebrated. The tragedy of Kevin Spacey's current existence lies in its limbo. He is not imprisoned, not legally condemned, yet he is also not free in the sense he once was. Freedom without recognition, survival without applause, these are the contours of his life now. For someone who once thrived on adoration, the silence of obscurity may be the harshest punishment of all. The downfall of Kevin Spacey has reignited one of the oldest debates in art and culture. Can audiences separate the brilliance of a performance from the flaws of the person who delivers it? For decades, Spacey had been celebrated as one of the finest actors of his generation, a man who could vanish into characters with such mastery that viewers forgot they were watching a performance. His roles in The Usual Suspects, American Beauty, and House of Cards are still studied in acting schools, still referenced in discussions of great screen performances. Yet those same roles are now shadowed by his name, leaving many to wonder if it is possible to admire the art without endorsing the artist. This question has no simple answer. Some argue that genius must be preserved, that a work of art can outlive and transcend the human being who created it. They claim that to erase Kevin Spacey's performances is to deny the cultural value they once offered, to punish audiences for the actions of an individual. Others see it differently. They believe that to celebrate his art is to ignore the pain of those who accused him, to overlook the power imbalance that allegedly allowed misconduct to thrive. For them, watching Spacey on screen now feels tainted, the brilliance overshadowed by the darkness behind it. Hollywood itself struggles with this dilemma. His films remain in circulation, his awards remain on record, yet his name has become taboo. In interviews, actors who once praised him hesitate to mention him. Directors sidestep questions. Film retrospectives skip over his work, as though acknowledging him would reopen wounds the industry would rather keep closed. It is a silence that speaks volumes, one that reflects the unease of trying to reconcile admiration for talent with condemnation of character. For audiences, the conflict is deeply personal. Some still watch American Beauty and marvel at its artistry, while feeling conflicted about the man at its center. Others refuse entirely, unable to look past the accusations no matter the verdicts. This fracture between art and artist ensures that Kevin Spacey's legacy will never be simple. His performances may endure, but they will always be accompanied by a question mark, a debate that refuses to be resolved. In the end, Kevin Spacey has become more than a man or an actor. He is a case study in the uneasy balance between brilliance and morality, a reminder that sometimes the greatest talent can cast the darkest shadows. At 66, Kevin Spacey stands as one of the most paradoxical figures Hollywood has ever produced. His legacy is at once undeniable and irreparably damaged. On one hand, his performances remain etched into the cultural memory of cinema and television. His chilling transformation in The Usual Suspects, his haunting portrayal in American Beauty, and his commanding presence in House of Cards cannot simply be erased. These works will continue to be studied, remembered, and even admired for their artistry. Yet on the other hand, the man behind them carries a stain that time and even acquittal cannot wash away. For many, Kevin Spacey represents both the pinnacle of artistic talent and the peril of unchecked power. His story is not merely about one man's rise and fall, but about an industry that enabled, silenced, and then turned its back in a single breath. Hollywood applauded him until it no longer could, and when the tide shifted, it cast him out with equal intensity. This duality raises painful questions about accountability, complicity, and the cost of silence. In his quiet present, Spacey reflects the image of a man without a stage, a performer denied the one thing that gave his life meaning. Freedom without redemption has become his reality. He is legally exonerated yet socially erased, a cautionary tale whispered among studios and artists alike. For audiences, his story is a reminder that genius does not exist in a vacuum. The applause that once echoed endlessly can vanish overnight, and the artist who once seemed untouchable can be reduced to a ghost. Kevin Spacey's legacy may never find balance. He will always be remembered as both a master of his craft and as a symbol of the darker truths about power in Hollywood. Perhaps that is the truest reflection. Brilliance and ruin, applause and silence, forever intertwined in the life of a man who once held the world's stage and now lingers at its edge.